Welcome to Black Girl Say Something, where this black girl has something to say. In this episode, I just wanted to take the time to really just address some of my thoughts that I've been having, right? A lot of times I think thoughts or I see something on social media, and while I am in a headspace where I can make a video about it, I typically am not one to create certain videos on social media as it relates to particular topics, because honestly, I don't want the discourse in my comments and I don't want the back and forth. And I think I like sharing those thoughts on the podcast because, in all honesty, one or two things happen. You're going to listen. People listen in to see what this black girl has to say. But also, if they really have any feeling or discourse about it, they can just take it up with their feelings, because again, you can't leave a comment or anything. Now, there's been times where I've had a person send me an email about a particular topic, but even then it's up to me if I want to address the email or not. So with that being said, I think we all have at this point in social media have seen where that teacher has allowed those girls to take his hair out. And I think the topic or the idea that I want to present to my listeners, to my supporters, is that just because something is inappropriate, or let's not align inappropriate, and being inappropriate does not always have to mean sexual, right? So it's something that I've taught my children, what are appropriate and what's inappropriate. And one of the things that I teach them that is inappropriate is your interaction with an adult. So, but because I have two children, it's easier to use them as a pair to say how you act with your brother is not how you're going to act with an adult. And how you act with your sister is not how you're going to act with an adult. And this gives them the idea that they are peers to an extent. And even with them being of different ages, they are technically not peers. And so what I had saw on social media, of course, I'm silent in nature. If I disagree, I typically don't voice my disagreement on social media because, again, I don't like the discourse that people have. And typically people say things on social media that they wouldn't really say in real life. And being that I'm somebody who what I will say in real life, I don't portray on social media. So with that being said, I saw a lot of people saying, it's not inappropriate because it wasn't sexual. And then I realized, people don't realize something can be inappropriate without it being sexual. So, for example, if we can all agree that what he did, allowing those girls to take his hair out, was unprofessional, wouldn't being unprofessional be inappropriate? And even if we use the example to say, if he was taking out his own hair in class, that's unprofessional, which also could be inappropriate. And so I just wanted to share with those of you that are listening, do you ever wonder, and for the sake of this, because I know I have some diehard listening supporters, I'll leave it open. If you're listening on Spotify, you'll be able to answer the question because I'll leave the question box open. But do you believe that people do not understand the difference between inappropriate and sexual inappropriateness? And I think, we can all say what he was doing was inappropriate because we have a level of understanding that something can be inappropriate without being sexual. Now, there was a twofold part to the conversation because I also recognize people do not understand what grooming means. And even in the state of getting my daughter, who is 14 years old, and getting my son, who is 9 years old, to understand what grooming is, meaning that an adult should not want to entertain you to your level. And I know I often have talked about how I'm my daughter's friend, but guess what? At the same time, there is a very strong boundary, gotta triple it up, in her knowing the difference between me being a friend to her and being one of her little friends. Because, when our mom used to say, I'm not one of your little friends, it makes sense now. Because them not being one of your little friends, I know that when I was in school, there were some really interesting male teachers who you end up finding out later on after you graduated they were doing inappropriate things, sexually inappropriate things with girls of the same age. And then there were even some that were being sexually inappropriate with these girls once they turned 18. And so it always made you think, were they a part of that grooming process? And you look back on it and they were. They would be the ones to allow you to skip class and hang out in their classroom. They would be the ones to take you to go get lunch. And me knowing that adults are not one of my little friends, I always would disengage that type of a behavior, that type of inappropriateness, because adults are not one of your little friends. And even, for example, at my kid's school, they had a teacher. He made a comment to say, he said something to the effect of, I think another teacher or the vice principal had said something to him, and he was like, in front of the kids after the vice principal left, and he said something to the nature of, I don't think I'm gonna work here much longer because they too strict, something like that. But my daughter, in casual conversation, brought it to my attention, and it didn't sit right with me, and I said something to the owner of the school. Now, there was something else that transpired, but he no longer works at the school. And something that transpired was not sexual in nature, but it was inappropriate. Having adult conversations in front of children in a school setting is inappropriate. And because the school doesn't stand for that, he was let go. And so I think, even I saw a video, before I get into that thought, I even saw a video, someone stitched a video on TikTok where it was one of the girls' moms saying, oh, my daughter is one of the ones in the video. Why he didn't ask me to take out his hair. Already, I was like, wow, that mom is going to grow up to be jealous of her daughter. Because she's like, I look good. He could have asked me to take out his hair. I would have done it. But essentially, she never said she saw anything wrong with her daughter taking out his hair. That was just weird. And I know there is some discourse between people saying, like, how Gen Z and how millennial parents parent. And it's just one of those things where, as somebody who's born in 87, I guess I'd be a millennial. I'm not lumped into that conversation because I don't know if it's because I've had therapy or because I've been an adult for so long, even when I was a child, and having to, one, reparent myself, one, grow, one, get married and divorced, have 2 children, have had multiple careers in different healthcare sectors, and always be a breadwinner, a go-getter, and just somebody who all around holds myself to a certain standard when it comes to integrity. I just don't understand for the life of me how some people can allow their daughters, when we know what goes on in the world, or allow their sons. Because again, there's just certain things you can't say to my son. Y'all have heard me say how I will chop it at the chopping block when you say certain things to my daughter. But y'all don't know. There's certain times I have to say certain things to people as it relates to my son. You got one too many times to say how handsome he is and how, hey, check this out. He's just a kid. He don't even, please back up off him. Leave him alone. And it's just one of those things where, I want them to have the safe space to grow into themselves without thinking, you know what, I remember that person told me I was so handsome and I'm going to be a heartbreaker. Like, why should a little boy have that in the back of his mind because you let somebody speak over your son? And while it may not be sexual in nature, it is inappropriate. It's inappropriate to compliment a young boy in that way. There's like such a big conversation that needs to happen when it comes down to the comprehension of the comprehensive understanding of what is inappropriate when it comes to children. And there's a lot of people who get into these fields of school and medicine and education, medicine, and just in general, they get into these spaces where they have access, because all a groomer turned predator needs is access. And gaining access is so easy if they just have the right tools. And I'll never forget when I worked my very first job as a phlebotomist. I'm like 19 years old, fresh out of 18. I turned 19 working that job. And the part of our orientation was having security to speak to us. And he said, look to the person to your left, look to the person to your right. All of you passed the background check, but that doesn't mean you're not a criminal. And that stayed with me. And I just think about it, when you think about it, just because a person works in a school system, and of course, most of these things happen with male, but they happen with females too. So we'll just say a person. When a person gets into the field of working in a school, they have to pass such a rigorous background check. But it's as simple as they've never been caught. So with that being said, they have now access to these children. And that doesn't mean that they have always bad intentions. But if you don't know what their intention is, you don't know what their intention is until they're caught and put on a registry. And so we have to get at the forefront of it to teach our children what's inappropriate and what's not appropriate, even as it relates to other children. The number one thing I always preach to my children is no one should be going to the bathroom with you. No one should be in the stall with you. No one should be helping you. And then I turn around and let them know no one should be asking you for help. Because again, as a grown man, what do you need from a child? Adults should not be asking children for intimate levels of help. It's one thing to be in a classroom and your teacher asks you, hey, can you help clean up? That is the level of help that should be asked. But a teacher should not be asking, can you help me unzip my jacket? That's intimate help. And I think if we can really sit down and have these types of conversations, but the people having the conversations, one, have to be in a mindset and understanding what is going on. And I think it requires a certain level of education and comprehension and communication. But that's another topic for another time. But with that being said, I pray that those of you who have children, you are being mindful, you are open and listening, you are creating safe spaces, you are humble enough to know that you don't know everything. And if your child says something feels off and something feels funny with an adult, that you are in a space to hear them. Because, and I say that with the most humility, because this past week has been such a week with my children where my irritability was at an all-time high. And I had to come down from that one night and pray and just ask God, never let me miss the mark when it comes down to giving my children a safe space to hear from them. Never let me miss that mark. And I never want to miss it because I'm having a day or I'm irritable. Let me be able to hear them even through me being irritable, because I was just having a week. So if something was said that resonated with you, you can share this episode with at least one person. Remember, Black Girl Say Something airs an episode every Friday on Apple Music, Spotify, Podvine, iHeartRadio, and honestly, wherever you listen to podcasts, every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There'll be some links in the description of this episode where you can subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on TikTok, and be a paid subscriber to the podcast to have access to subscriber-only content. And don't forget that we air an episode on our YouTube every last Friday of the month. And I believe that this month will be, the last Friday is May 31st. So make sure you check that out. Thank you for listening.